It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live. Although I have pre-recorded a couple on a kind of dead man switch, if you get my drift. Happy celestial 83rd birthday to the great George Harrison, the most beautiful of the most fabulous four exports in British history. Here comes the sun, sang George, but is it the sun or is it the nuclear flash? And if that's the state of your union, Donald Trump, you can keep it. It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Here Comes the Sun, one of the most beautiful of the many beautiful songs penned by the late and great George Harrison. Well, it is already springtime, although it kind of doesn't feel like it yet. But the Chinese New Year is over, the Lunar Festival, the Spring Festival is over, and, well, here comes the sun, one must hope. But is it the sun? Or is it the nuclear blast? Because I have never known a time when nuclear threshold, even in rhetoric, never mind in military preparation, has never been lower. Israelis, including officials, including ministers, openly talk about their illegally held nuclear weapons and how they may very well fire them at the Islamic Republic of Iran, turning into a desert, of course. All the Arab satrapies, American satrapies, all around it Well, I know they're a desert anyway. They're certainly a political desert, but the desertification of the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf would be complete and permanent. And that would be a lot less diamonds and pearls for Donald Trump to collect on his next visit to the area. But even more alarmingly, my own country and France, that is to say, the governments of Britain and France, are reportedly proposing to transfer nuclear materials for the production of a dirty nuclear bomb to give little Zelensky leverage in the talks going on between the United States and the Russian government. If that's true, and it has not properly been denied, it has not been repudiated as an aim, then the lunatics have truly taken control of the asylum. This would not just be a criminal act. This would not just be an insane act. It would be the act that triggered all-out nuclear war in Europe. And for those of you on the other side of the Atlantic, it's highly likely, if the United States observed its Article 5 obligations under the NATO treaty, which I'll grant you is very much a moot point, then it would be an intercontinental war. It would be the mother of all wars. It would be the end of all wars. If anyone survived it, they'd fight the next war with sticks and stones. It doesn't get any more serious than that, does it? The British government, with 11% approval rate in British public opinion, the French government, not much more popular, if more popular at all, are proposing to transfer their nuclear technology to the most unstable, to the most deeply corrupt, and to the most anti-democratic, the most illegitimate government in the continent of Europe. What could possibly go wrong? Well, only the end of the world. Give me love, give me peace on earth, sang George Harrison. All things must pass, said he. Well, all things must pass, including he. But Keir Starmer's prime ministership will pass tomorrow night around 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. If Labour lose, as they deserve to, the epochal parliamentary by-election in Manchester, Gorton and Denton, his prime ministership is over. Now his successors might conclude that it's better if he hangs on until May so that he can take the blame for the tsunami of Labour defeats. It will be the slaughter of Labour councillors in May, and then someone else can take over afterwards. But it's my belief that if, as I expect, the Green Party, fighting with our support on a platform of opposition to war, opposition to the war that's getting ready to be waged in Iran, about which more in a couple of minutes, opposition to austerity, making the working class pay for crimes they never committed, for blunders they never made, and of course the need to punish the Starmer Labour Party for its absolutely transparent, from their own mouths, collaboration with Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza. If you're not going to punish a government for that, what are you ever going to punish a government for? And equally important, well, almost equally important, to reject the use of race baiting, religious and racial hatred being fomented by the right-wing British nationalist parties fighting in this by-election and across the country to keep them at bay to stop their state-sponsored rise and rise. This is an important point. The deep state is encouraging these right-wing parties. In fact, let me take a flyer here, though my editor will curse me. I believe that the seizing of me and my wife at Gatwick Airport, at gunpoint, and our questioning about China and Russia, about Israel and Palestine, for 9 hours in total, at gunpoint, was intimately connected to the Gorton and Denton by-election, which they must have known was in the offing. I had fought an election in Denton and Gorton before. We as a party have mass support in Denton and Gorton. We won a significant seminal victory in Gorton and Denton in the ward of Longsight not that long ago. They seized me and effectively made me leave the country precisely so that I could not stand in what turned out to be the imminent by-election in Gorton and Denton. But I'm done roaming. 7 elections as a Member of Parliament is enough for me. Having been a Member of Parliament across 5 decades is enough for me. I am happy to support the Green Party candidate, and we fully expect a reciprocal backing in the 3 constituencies where we came second at the last general election, and everywhere that we have elected councillors, we will contend that we should have a clear run at those in the next general election. But the state of Keir Starmer was thought to be as low as it could go. But if he transfers nuclear material, if Macron transfers nuclear material to Zelensky, it will probably be the last thing that they ever do. Because in Moscow they have been as clear as it is possible to be that any transfer of nuclear weapons to Zelensky will bring nuclear retaliation in advance, preemptive nuclear retaliation, not just against Zelensky and his regime, but against Britain and France for their reckless and existential irresponsibility. And who could blame them if they did? Now, as I said at the beginning, if that's the state of your union, Donald Trump, you are welcome to it. The seals, the clapping seals, were divided. The Republicans clapped on immigration, on the economy, on the shredding of taxes to the richest people in the United States. The Democrats sat on their hands. But there was a crucial moment at which all the seals clapped together. There was a crucial moment when all of the seals got up on their hind haunches and clapped a standing ovation for Donald J. Trump. What do you think that particular moment? What was the proximate reason for the only joint standing ovation at the State of the Union speech in Washington, DC last night? That's right. It was Trump's. He's got a good memory, I've got to tell you. He memorized Benjamin Netanyahu's talking points absolutely perfectly. And he delivered them, albeit in that ham, actorly, kabuki theater kind of way. He delivered them. with certain aplomb. And what were the lines? Well, they were a pack of lies, of course. He actually said that the Iranians refused to say that they will not build nuclear weapons, even though they say it every single day, and had said it that very day from the mouth of the man they're supposed to be meeting. I wouldn't necessarily expect them to turn up, by the way, Mr. Araghchi. But the foreign minister of Iran said it that very day, while Trump said to the world watching the State of the Union speech that the Iranians refused to say that they will not build nuclear weapons. When you are dealing with mendacity on that scale, you first of all got to ask yourself, how stupid are the people listening that they can clap that they don't know that that's a complete fiction, it is a falsehood, it is a bright, shining lie. He also said the Iranians were building ballistic missiles that could reach all the way to the United States. That's another brazen, total black lie. The Iranians have deliberately limited the range of their ballistic missiles to 2,000 miles, which is way short of the United States. Maybe Donald Trump meant to say that their ballistic missiles could hit one of our 800 US military bases around the world. Maybe he meant that, in which case he's right. Not only can they, Donald, they will. They will hit every United States base, and the poor bloody infantry of the United States Army, Navy, and Air Force will pay with their blood, which Lindsey Graham says is a price worth paying to defend Netanyahu and Israel. For make no mistake, that is the one and only reason why the United States imminently, apparently, is going to launch a shock and awe mass bombardment for weeks of Iranian people, property and things, of Iranian infrastructure, water, electricity, houses, priceless architectural treasures, including, by the way, some of the most priceless Jewish architectural, historical treasures to be found anywhere in the world, because, of course, Iran has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel in the region, and other than in New York City, in the world. Shock and awe, blood and gore, blood and treasure, being burned, being incinerated, all for Israel. Tell me what else it can be for. What threat is Iran to the United States of America? The United States of America is many thousands of miles away. It is America that has surrounded Iran with its nuclear and other firepower, not the other way around. The people of Iran have not invaded anybody in 300 years, but plenty of people have invaded them, and all of them with the support of the very powers that are currently besieging Iran right now. The Iranians are not going to build a nuclear war. More fool them, in my opinion. I saw little Kim Jong-un being re-elected as the Korean Workers' Party president. Seems popular, by the way. There's nobody floating aircraft carriers off the coast of Korea. There's nobody threatening to invade North Korea, there's nobody sending Starlink illegal paraphernalia into North Korea. They wouldn't last 5 minutes if they did. Nobody is going to attack North Korea because they have nuclear weapons. But Iran, for its own theological reasons, has turned its face against nuclear weapons and says so every single day. The United States has no casus belli other than the hatred of Netanyahu for Iran and the determination of the Greater Israel Project to completely dominate from the River Nile to the River Euphrates in Iraq, taking out half of Egypt, taking out all of Palestine, all of Lebanon, all of Jordan, much of Saudi Arabia, and half of Iraq. That's their Greater Israel. They wear patches on their military sleeves delineating this Greater Israel. What do you think those two stripes on the Israel flag represent? They represent the Nile and the Euphrates. When they say from the river to the sea, they don't mean the Jordan River and they don't mean the Mediterranean Sea. That's what this is all about. And so you would need to ask yourself, why would the United States expend its blood and treasure in defense of such a project? Why would the United States destroy its own allies, having gratuitously insulted them in the mouth of Mike Huckabee last week? Why would it now endanger the very existence of the family dictatorships that rule the Arab countries in the Persian Gulf? Why would they do that? The answer is Jeffrey Epstein. The answer is the cash and the compromat that they have used to state capture the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, and other countries, including Canada. And I'm about to speak about Canada right after this short break. It's Yves Engler, the man who should be leading the Democratic Party in Canada, the NDP, which should be the real opposition to imperialist policies. All coming up right after this. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live. Is Israel planning to use nuclear weapons against Iran? Well, they say so. I'm not sure what division there is about that. Is Israel planning to use nuclear weapons against Iran? Well, you can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, do subscribe to my channel. More than half of you who watch the show on YouTube have not yet subscribed to my channel. How many times have I got to ask you? It only takes you the click of a button. Ditto, give a thumbs up to the show if you enjoy it, which I presume you do because you keep coming back in record numbers. So I'm not asking you for much. I'm just asking for a thumbs up, and I'm asking for a subscription to my YouTube channel. You can also vote if you're one of the creme de la creme who support the show through Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. You can also vote at the ballot box present there also. Wow, almost 25,000, more than 25,000 people have already voted, and I'm just announcing it now. If you want to call the show, it is toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 966 2625. Now, I know a thing or two about the authoritarian nature of many of the political class in Canada. It is a wonderful, beautiful country. I've toured it all. I've even been to its Arctic Circle and addressed the good people of Yellowknife. I've spoken in every major place in Canada, but always they tried to stop me. Always they had cops in the room writing down what I was saying. Always there was the shadow of tyranny hanging above my head. My next guest knows that even better than I. Yves Engler is the founder of Canadian Foreign Policy Institute. He's a political activist. He's an author. He's an all-round national hero in Canada. And he's also one of the foremost supporters of the Palestinians. So, well, you can guess what happened to him. Yves Engler, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Great to see you in the flesh. Why don't we start by talking about what happened to you and why?
First of all, thanks for having me. I was thrown in jail about a year ago for 5 days for responding to a fanatic Zionist influencer on X. And I had to go to jail for 5 days to defeat a condition for my release that they wanted to impose that said I couldn't mention the case against me. So I couldn't mention this pro-genocide influencer who had said that I was harassing her, even though I never met her, never talked to her, never threatened her. All I did was respond to pro-Zionist tweets. And I defeated the condition. They ultimately abandoned the charges, but because I promoted this email campaign to the Montreal police saying that that they should drop this condition and drop the charges, the police then charged me with 3 different counts of harassing the police, harassing the threatening communication and interference. And just actually about a month ago, they were able to find me guilty of 3 different charges for an email campaign that I promoted on my social media that began with "Dear" and ended with "Sincerely." So it was not in any way threatening to the police, but was just communicating with the police. And because so many people responded to this email campaign against these charges that were brought against me for responding to a Zionist influencer on X, the police were actually able to convict me, and I have a sentencing coming up in early March. We just launched the appeal of this absurd campaign, these absurd charges. And effectively, I'm one of hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of Canadians who have faced the wrath of the state because they have opposed Canadian complicity in genocide.
So wait, what? The public in Canada are not allowed to email the police to complain? At least not if there are sufficient numbers of them that the police have to take notice? Is that really where we're at? The Mounties, the men that always got their man, the lovable Canadian mounted police under royal title. Are we really at that stage in Canada that it's a crime to ask someone to email the police?
Yeah, they're supposed to be out there chasing murderers and big drug heists, but they're so vulnerable that some emails can make them feel threatened. And we literally had a police investigator that came before the judge and claimed that she felt threatened, and this was violent. One of the charges is violent communication. And that was also part of the argument too. It was the scale. So if I would have been unsuccessful in this campaign, and this was, I should note, it was Action Network. It's a very well-known U.S.-based email petition website, and this is what the technology we were using. And they made the claim that if it hit a certain threshold, it became, harassment and a form of violence, versus if it only would have been 50 people instead of a few thousand people, then it would not necessarily have been criminal. And they also noted that the Montreal Police Department was able to bring in a filter on the email of the investigator fairly quickly at the beginning of her day. So in fact, all the emails got filtered out too. So she wasn't even seeing them after like the first hour and a half of her shift that day.
What happened to Canada, Yves? Most people, certainly of my age, remember it as the nice country in North America, as the country that stood for peace, sent peacekeepers to hotspots like Lebanon, where they helped protect the Palestinian refugees. What happened to Canada? Where did it all go wrong?
Well, I would argue that Canada has, historically been an extension of the British Empire, then an extension of the U.S. Empire. And if you look at Canadian foreign policy, and I've written many books on this subject, that it has usually aligned with those two main empires. It has assisted, in the partition, in the conquering of Palestine in 1917, in the partition plan. It was Canadian diplomats played a central role. Look elsewhere. Canada, contributed to the horrible war in Korea, the first Iraq War, bombing Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Libya. Was a Canadian general that led Libya in 2011. So there's a long history of Canadian militarism and imperialism. But I think over the past couple years, we have seen this real upsurge in what I label Zionist authoritarianism. And there's this real effort to ban protests in front of different community centers, different religious institutions, all because it's basically a pushback from pro-Israel kind of forces. Like I mentioned, there's been hundreds and hundreds of people who've been fired from their jobs, who've been jailed. This is a regular state of affairs of imposing these different conditions. So even if someone never gets found guilty for anything, they end up with a condition for a year or longer, restraining their ability to go to demonstrations, restricting their ability to speak out. So that's something that's long-standing. And it has really worsened in recent years, and it's something that we have to push back on. We've seen the success with the Palestine Action pushback. We've had similar things like that in Canada, where a group, the Samidoun Palestinian Political Prisoners Network, a Vancouver-based grassroots organization, was put on Canada's terrorism list and effectively banned. It's not quite as draconian as the what's happened with Palestine Action and the the terrorism list in the UK, but it's a similar kind of dynamic where the Zionist forces are literally getting Canadian-based organizations banned. That's after, of course, all of the Palestinian groups, anybody involved in any resistance in Palestine has been, banned in Canada as a terrorist organization. And now it's being increasingly turned on groups based in this country. And the Zionist forces are pushing that. So there's a history of repression. It's not something new, but over the past 2.5 years, in part because there have been so many demonstrations, there have been so many actions, there has been so much protest against Canadian complicity that they've begun with all kinds of different efforts to suppress those movements.
Isn't your government supposedly a liberal government? Is that a misnomer in Canada, as it is indeed in many parts of the world?
It is a misnomer. It was a liberal government. Justin Trudeau, who was probably even a little bit more liberal than the current Mark Carney, that listed the Samidoun Palestinian Political Prisoner Network as a terrorist organization. Mark Carney has, he's gone on record a couple of times now saying that, Trudeau called himself a Zionist. He left, one of the last things he did before leaving office was call himself a Zionist. Mark Carney he says what he wants is a Zionist Palestinian state, and he's repeated that a couple of times. Which effectively is, I think, the Palestinian Authority that we currently see is sort of what he has in mind. And Canada has, I've said this many times, if we just upheld our existing laws vis-a-vis Israel when it comes to Canadians joining the Israeli military in violation of the Foreign Enlistment Act, when it comes to Canadians who fought in Gaza, uphold the War Crimes Against Humanity Act and investigate them. When it comes to the registered charities, about towards $500 million, $400 million a year is raised by tax subsidized organizations in Canada for projects in Israel. Many of them support Israeli military, racist organizations, settlements in the West Bank. That's all contrary to existing legislation. If we upheld our own laws on the Export-Import Act and with regards to Canadian arms exports to Israel, it would go a long way in advancing justice. But we continue to treat, 2.5 years into the live stream genocide, we continue to treat Israel as a completely unique country where, in January of 2020, the Canadian ambassador in Israel actually had a pizza party for Canadians fighting in the Israeli military. Why in the world would a Canadian ambassador have a pizza party for anyone fighting in any other country's military, let alone one engaged in overseeing apartheid and violence all across the region? But we continue to treat Israel as this totally unique country, all these special forms of support, and much of which is actually illegal according to existing Canadian law. And we're not able to shift the political calculus away from that intense support for killing Palestinians and violence across the region.
And pizza parties have since gotten a very, very bad name. Just switching gear, Yves, as I don't often get to speak with eminent Canadians such as yourself. Are any of these dynamics going to be affected by the extreme hostility evinced from Washington against the very existence of an independent Canadian state? I mean, when the Americans are threatening to take over your country altogether, actively trying to break off a part of it, encouraging a separatist breakaway state in the west of the country and so on. This behavior by Trump and by the United States, does that not change anything in internal Canadian politics? Yeah,
well, about 9 months, 10 months ago, when Trump was beginning his annexation threats, the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute put out email action alert, and we called for a pause of Canadian officer exchanges with the US military so long as Trump is threatening to annex Canada. And we called for a pause in joint naval deployments, which Canadian naval vessels deploy, all around the world with US vessels. Canadians were involved. The pause was not successful. We didn't even get the opposition parties to raise the matter. There were Canadians involved in the crime in Venezuela of bombing, and then probably involved even in the actual kidnapping of Maduro. Canadians involved with the U.S. military exchange program. So there is a deep hostility among the population. We have a situation where Canadians really are, regular travel to the U.S. has greatly diminished. There's people boycotting products from the U.S., fairly substantive numbers on that. And there was a recent poll showing that Canadians overwhelmingly see the U.S. as the main threat to Canada, far higher than what our elite want us to focus on, which is China and Russia. And yet you have the chief of the defense staff of the Canadian military going down to Washington and trying to deepen ties with the U.S. military. So there is a shift. There is, a popular sentiment shift, but the power structure, particularly with the military, particularly with the intelligence agencies, is so tied in with the U.S. empire, so deferential to Washington, that dynamic hasn't really changed. Now, we did see Mark Carney go to China. And there's a big segment of the corporate class, of the business class, that understands that you need to move away from this dependence on the U.S. Market. And so they want to, restart trade ties with China and other countries. So you see some shifting, I would say, on the trade front, but you don't really see a shift on the geopolitical front, where Canada is just, completely pro-Zionist, completely pro-U.S. empire, be it from, intimidating Haitians. Like Mark Carney made that speech in Davos about a month ago where he talked about, the collapse of the international rules-based order. He talked about sovereignty. Well, within 24 hours, our foreign minister was down and threatening the Haitians if the Haitian Transition Council didn't follow Washington's orders, that we would sanction them alongside Marco Rubio. So obviously they don't care at all about Haitian sovereignty, and we've been undercutting Haitian sovereignty for more than 20 years in a very aggressive way. So you see some shifts definitely on popular opinion, but the structures of power, specifically the militaristic and intelligence pro-U.S. empire dynamic, really hasn't shifted, despite all of Trump's ongoing threats and economic attacks.
And where stands the NDP in all this? Once the great hope of socialism in North America, you tried to stand as leader. They didn't let you. Have they got a better leader than you? What's that all about?
Yeah, the NDP is the traditional third party. Some elements of the NDP want to, replicate the Labour Party in Britain. They have never had that success. They have at the provincial level. They're a government right now in British Columbia and in Manitoba, but never federally. I was blocked from running. This unelected three-person vetting committee just said, no, you're not allowed to run, because they cited a whole bunch of almost all foreign policy issues, from claiming I'm pro-Russia to being anti-Semitic to being pro or against or deny of the Rwandan genocide, to a whole series of foreign policy issues. And then they denied the campaign manager, who happens to be my partner, Bianca Mageni, who has a whole other history of activism and organizational history going back many decades. And they blocked her on the grounds that she was a proxy for our campaign, even though we have a very elaborate platform and thousands of people involved in the campaign. So they really don't want internationalist or anti-imperialist views in the leadership race. We're calling for Canada out of NATO. That is outside of bounds in the NDP world. They are, social democratic. Avi Lewis, who is the sort of most leftward of the three main candidates, he may win. But this is a party that has become, it was founded, in an anti-communist kind of that dimension, and that's always been part of its history. But it did actually call for the eradication of capitalism, going back to the 1930s, right? The founding document, and it still, pushed socialism fairly aggressively until the last 15 or 20 years. But the sort of neoliberal party brass have gone in a very pro-corporate kind of way. They don't want a challenge of corporate power, and certainly don't want challenging of Canadian involvement in empire. So the party is it's the best of the bad lot. The nature of Canadian electoral politics is that it's very difficult to set up parties that have any chance of winning seats. I think it's easier in the UK than it is here. And so the left tends to focus on the NDP, even though the NDP has repeatedly repressed the left from the party. And in my case, in our campaign's case, they continue in that mold. But we've been disrupting things and not allowing them to do this in an easy way.
Time to give it up as a bad job, I'd say. Join us, Yves Engler, the author and co-founder of the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, and an all-round good egg. And I wish you luck at your sentencing in the next week. It sounds an outlandish proposition that you could have spent days in jail for organising an email campaign to get the police to back off. How extraordinary. Here's the poll. Is Israel planning to use nuclear weapons against Iran? Yes or no? Simple question. Vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on patreon.com/George Galloway. I'll take a break, then it's your calls coming next. Stay tuned. Beautiful call, as always, robust. Terrific characterization of little Macron and the imposter Shah of Los Angeles. He is, of course, an imposter in two ways. He's an imposter in pretending that he has any support from the great mass of the 90 million Iranians who've not seen him since he was 4 years old, when he fled with their riches in the saddlebags, and the father and mother, emperor, empress, Shah, roamed around the world from Monaco to God knows where, spending the millions that they had stolen from the people of Iran. But he's a pretender, an imposter, for a second reason. The Pahlavis are not even the royal family of Iran. The royal family of Iran is ancient, millennia, and the rightful emperor or Shah, if there is such a thing as a rightful emperor, rightful Shah, was overthrown by a corporal in the Iranian army, the grandfather of this joker Reza. His grandfather was a corporal, a private soldier in the Iranian army, was raised to the rank of corporal, and then, with British backing, overthrew the actual monarch. And he had a son who was the infamous Shah of Shahs, the father of Reza. So he's a double imposter.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
He's a double imposter. I hope someone brings that to the Great Pretender's notice. I'd love him to hear it. Now, scan the QR code now on your screen. You can leave a comment and I'll try and read them out, like this one from Alex Nosal 2277. He sends $15. Thank you, Alex. And says, we love Yves Engler. I must say he's a very impressive man. And Wave Function says, Ontario here. It's actually dangerous to oppose Zionists in Canada. They will arrest you. They did it to me. Well, I'm not going to try and go back there. I'm done roaming Canada. And Pauline Wooding says, the pro-Palestine lobby needs to get as efficient and persistent as UK lawyers for Israel and the like. And Mega John F1 says, Canada kidnapped Huawei CEO's daughter. Don't I know it's still a big, big issue in China. And Avigdor FYI says, how does Tommy Robinson get a visa when he was convicted of fraud to enter America illegally, then lied to the Canadian customs that he was born in Ireland? He does actually have an Irish passport in the same way that I will, although the Irish government's taking quite a long time to deal with my passport application. But I'm automatically entitled to be an Irish citizen because my grandparents were Irish. I expect that Robinson's in the same boat. Sal is on the line from Kingston. I don't know if it's Kingston upon Thames or Kingston, Jamaica, but Sal is welcome. Any case.
Hi, George. Yes, indeed, Kingston upon Thames.
He thinks the right and the left are dead. Go ahead, Sal.
Hi, George. I hope you hear me well. It is indeed Kingston upon Thames. I'm Iranian, and of course I'm very worried. And we all know that there is no post-invasion scenario, and that breaks my heart to see people coming, my countrymen, and cheerleading the attack. But this is about a different question. With the dividing lines between the right and left, traditional ones disappearing. You have Tucker Carlson, Zoran Mamdani on the same side. In terms of principles, we don't want people to be killed. We don't want so many different instances of injustice that unites a lot of people, as we've seen in the last, especially couple of years. Is it time, hopefully, that people like yourself started spearheading a political movement or even a party that's based on principles? It might just support right to left in terms of economic policies, but sticking to those principles: no killings, no wars without any justification, and attending to your own people before starting wars. And so, let me pause and wait for your reaction, please.
Well, I am already the leader of such a party. I'm the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. We're not left, we're socialist. Left nowadays means liberal, and we ain't no liberals, bruv. We are economically radical. Our foreign policy is radical. Our social policy is traditional. And we believe that these are the positions of the great majority of the British people. We believe the British people want a fairer share for the working class and for the pensioners who used to be working class and for the children who will be working class, proper share of the goods and services that the workers themselves produce. We believe in the state having a guiding hand in the economy, rather like the Chinese model, where there's plenty of capitalism, plenty of rich people, but nobody gets bigger than the state, which represents the interest of the public. That would be our economic policy. Our foreign policy is for Britain's national interests and for the interests of the British people, not for the interests of Israel, not for the interests of Brussels, not for the interests of Washington, but a foreign policy that serves the genuine national interests of the British people. Of course, we take a traditional view on many things. Drugs, for example, we hate drugs. As you probably know, Sal, I don't even drink alcohol, and I never have. So you can imagine my feelings about opium and opiates and all the other paraphernalia. Now, there are people who consider themselves left who take a very different view on these things. I believe that men are men and women are women. I don't believe, as the British Education Minister, really, the British Education Minister said on British television this morning that boys should be able to wear dresses to school, that children of 6 and 7 should be allowed to experiment with their gender, with their sexuality, and that people who are not going to be old enough to log on to Twitter, but they're well old enough to be able to decide to change their sex. I could go on, but probably shouldn't on the eve of a by-election. But I'm not left, I'm a socialist. I'm not liberal. I'm, if anything, the opposite of liberal. So there will always be, if you like, some cross-dressing, some movement. The examples you give of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, are spectacular examples. We are on the same side as them when it comes to the war in Iran, when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, and when it comes to many other things. But they're not going to join my party, and I'm not going to join theirs. There's no need to in any case. Where we have agreements, we should shout them from the rooftops. Where we have disagreements, we should keep these disagreements within limits so that cooperation on the things we agree on doesn't become impossible. We call that common sense. That's what the Workers' Party stands for, and I recommend it to you and everyone. Thanks, Sal. Now, a sincere thanks to this week's leading supporters who went to moats.tv and backed the show. Peter A. Baldwin, Asia Kashmiri, Davy Begg, Simon Allen, and Will Clark. Thank you very much, all of you, for your great generosity. Do please follow their lead and go to moats.tv sometime tonight and leave your donation. Julius is in Germany on Iran. Go ahead, Julius.
Hello, George. You know, after the nonsense by Witkoff about Iran being weeks away from a nuclear weapon, notice how he said Trump was frustrated they had not capitulated yet. This is one of the unfortunate demerits of imperialism, which is self-delusion. It was obvious Iran would not capitulate when they refused to meet in Turkey, which caught the U.S. by surprise, actually. George, I'm a man of faith. I still have faith that there might be an off-ramp somewhere. I'm really hoping that there will be no war. I mean, we were thinking that was going to happen last week, but it didn't. So I'm still clinging on to that hope. I think if Trump thought he could get away with a war politically, he would have done it by now, because he doesn't really care about peace. What he cares about is how people see him politically, because he's that much of a narcissist, I've noticed. And I think he knows that if the Strait of Hormuz closes due to the war, consequently affecting the economy, or if an aircraft carrier sinks, or if a base gets bombed and people die, the Dems will quickly blame him. The anti-Israel sentiments will get worse in the U.S. The Republicans will get slaughtered in the midterm elections, and he will be impeached so fast before his head spins. And after that, they will prosecute him as well. So, looking at it, I think
I think you've summed up the arguments perfectly. I don't need to repeat them. There's a very small window here, as Max Blumenthal was pointing out on the show just the other night. If you haven't watched that interview, you really must. The World Cup is in America in June. There's 3 people hosting the World Cup. There's a state of war in one of them. and the United States is not much better. And it might end up that the whole World Cup has to take place in Canada, because it certainly won't take place in the United States if there is an all-out war raging across West Asia, across what they call the Middle East. It certainly will not be safe to go to America. It certainly will not be safe to be an American. So it's a very short window. It's already almost March. The World Cup is in June. How are you going to get a war in Iran started and finished in time for the World Cup beginning? And then there's November, as you rightly say. Donald Trump will lose the midterm elections, especially if he's begun an all-out war in the Middle East. And when he loses, the consequences for him, well, his own leader of the majority leader in the House said so last night, that if the Democrats win the midterm elections, that's the end of Donald Trump's presidency. He'll be impeached on a weekly basis, maybe a daily basis, and prosecution will not be able to be avoided. And if he demits office early so that J.D. Vance can pardon him, if J.D. Vance pardons him, J.D. Vance can kiss goodbye to any possibility of being elected as the next president of the United States. So they're in a jam, Julius, and they thoroughly deserve to be. Now, did you know about the Moats podcast? If you didn't listen up to this, you can download it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. You can listen to the weekly podcast via the moats.tv website. Also, this week, our podcast is in the top 10 for politics in the Gambia, Egypt, the Lebanon, UAE, and Greece. How about that? And the top 20 for politics in Croatia, Mexico, Pakistan, and Malaysia. A big greeting to all our friends who listen to the podcast in those remarkable range of country. Well, we've had Yves Engler. Now we've got Yves in Florida. He wants to talk about Iran and the BRICS. On you go, Yves.
Yes, I would like to make a comment on what Max Blumenthal said last Sunday. He mentioned that Miriam Mandelson gave $100 million to Donald Trump, and he thought, I think, it was a lot of money. It's important to know that this is peanuts, because $100,000 get you one soldier with a gun for 1 year. So 100 million, it's 1,000 soldiers. That's all. That's all you have. For $100 million, Israel is capable of taking the whole military of the United States, with a ship, with a plane, with anything. So it's really nothing. So the question is, what is Israel telling the U.S.? Well, Israel is telling the U.S. that, of course, they want Iran to be destroyed, but they are telling the U.S. that if America destroy Iran, they will destroy, in fact, three countries, Iran, Russia, and China, and they take the weakest of the three, so they get it for cheap, because now the $10 billion so Israel pay $100 million, the war may cost $10 billion, and now they have $1 trillion if you listen to Israel, because they destroy Russia and China. The question for Donald Trump is, like your previous caller was saying, is that is it worth an aircraft carrier that they will lose? And if they lose an aircraft carrier, they will be nuked. And if Russia doesn't do anything about it, Ukraine will have nuke, because they will see that nuke pays, in fact. So this is a possible scenario a horrible scenario, but of World War III that we are living now. And I just wanted to share it with you.
Yeah, it's of course possible, but not for me plausible. I've been in Russia and China in the last few days, and I can assure you neither of those is going to be destroyed, even if Iran slips under the waves. And I don't believe that Iran will slip under the waves, at least not without exacting an enormous toll on the people who are destroying it. I believe that Israel will be a smoking ruin if all-out war begins. I believe not one but two American aircraft carriers will be sunk. And I don't believe the United States can fire a nuclear weapon at Iran, at least not a medium-range one, because the devastation to the surrounding countries would be fatal and terminal. So a very high cost will be paid for any all-out war in the region. And I'm beginning to think that Trump realizes that his military brass realize that. After all, we are talking about a U.S. Navy that is literally swimming in shit, that has an aircraft carrier where the toilets don't work, and where dysentery is in imminent danger of breaking out amongst the ranks. There was apparently a mutiny on board that aircraft carrier to force the commander to take it into a Greek port to see if they could do anything about the fact that excrement was literally floating everywhere in the boat. So we are talking about a very far from ideal scenario. Now, will Russia and China join the war? Probably not in the way that I imagined you, maybe I, would wish that they would, but they won't be uninvolved. They're not uninvolved, even right at this minute, before the war has begun. They're not uninvolved. Their electronic warfare apparatus, their anti-aircraft, anti-missile batteries are all present and correct. Their collaboration at sea between the Russian and Iranian navies was entirely visible in the last week, but there's also less than entirely visible cooperation going on also under the water and behind the scenes. So I think that the Iranians, if there is a war, will give a very, very good account of themselves. And it may very well be that the backlash in the United States to Trump's reckless adventurism will be the end of him. Thanks very much, Yves. I've got to take a quick break because coming up is the one and only Judge Andrew Napolitano. Here comes the judge after this. Stay tuned. Full marks to you for your dogged persistence and your quiet and dignified insistence that you were right and I was wrong. I don't actually recall the clash that we had, but I would have to say that you are being proven right, and I am being proven to have hoped for things that have not transpired. Because I said all along, I repeated it 100 times, that the big enchilada, World War III, an intensification of American involvement in the Ukraine war was more likely to happen under the Democrats, under President Kamala Harris, than under a renewed President Trump. And I'll go to the stake defending that position.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
He has the wisdom of Solomon. If Donald Trump had any wisdom, he'd have been on the Supreme Court. He is Judge Andrew Napolitano. Nowadays, one of the greatest stars on alternative independent media, and always very generous with our requests for him to join us. Judge Napolitano, Your Honor, thanks again for coming with us. Your own show, Judging Freedom, is an absolute must-see for everyone watching this. So was the State of the Union address last evening. Did the earth move for you?
Well, George, it's always a pleasure to be on with you, my dear friend. I've learned so much from you, both from watching your show and from the times we've spent together, and I look forward to spending time with you very soon when I come across the ocean. I thought that the president was almost out of his mind last night when he said that the Iranians have resumed work on a nuclear weapon that will be capable of reaching Western Europe and the United States. This type of a scare tactic, not based on any facts whatsoever, is reprehensible. Equally as reprehensible is the fact that if you watch the speech, you know that the Democrats didn't applaud for him at all. They only applauded once. And that's when he made that comment about why we need to attack Iran. This tells you that the Zionist donor class owns the government. Even the liberal Democrats who hate Trump, even the people who, if they achieve the majority, and it now appears they will, in the midterm elections, will impeach him every week, or as you suggested, perhaps even every day. Nothing will stop them. However, because they too are beholden to the Zionist donor class in America, they applauded wildly when he said, we must destroy Iran's nuclear capability because they're building something that can reach the United States and Western Europe. They're not. However, if Trump had not ripped up the JPCOA, we would still have inspections going on even as we speak by neutral inspectors agreed to by both sides. But of course, we don't have that anymore. What we do have is the testimony of your friend and mine, Tulsi Gabbard, who runs the intelligence community, which has asserted as recently as a year ago, and she stated it under oath, that Iran stopped developing nuclear weapon capability in 2003. That's 16 years ago. When confronted with this statement said under oath, Trump simply stated, I don't care what she said, I believe otherwise. He believes what Netanyahu and the domestic Zionists want him to believe, irrespective of the absence of evidence. So that's my long-winded analysis of the most dangerous part of what he said. Did I watch the whole thing? No, I went to bed before it started. I watched the clips this morning.
It's far from long-winded, Your Honor. It was priceless prose. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I'll ask you anyway, because I'm interested on a human level. Do the people that were listening in the hall, you can't speculate about the people who watched on TV, but the people in the hall who applauded the blatantly false statement that Iran refuses to say the magic words, we will not build nuclear weapons, when in fact they say those very words every single day, including that day in which the president lied about them. Do the people in the hall, do they know this to be a lie and cheer it anyway? Or, I mean, in other words, are they too stupid to be United States Congress members, or are they too wicked?
That's a great question, George, and I'm afraid I don't have an answer. I could speculate. My speculation is that they're wicked. that they know what Iran has stated. And as you know, they've not only stated it verbally, they've stated in writing, a writing which has never been revealed to the press. But these members of Congress, as I said, are bought lock, stock, and barrel by the Zionist donor class. It's not all of them, but it's an overwhelming majority in both houses of Congress, as is Trump himself bought by these very people. I mean, can you imagine if Trump waved a piece of paper last night and says, this has President Pezeshkian's signature on it, and the magic words are there. Therefore, I've directed that the United States Navy shall come home. Well, Netanyahu would go wild. The Zionist donors would go wild. They would begin attacking Trump. God knows what they'd reveal about his personal life from the Epstein files. It would be ruination for him. So he's really boxed himself into a corner. As one of your callers said, to whom I was listening maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago, if he doesn't attack, he looks weak. If he does attack, he may unleash demons that he can't control, demons that will destroy the state of Israel.
I'm going to come on to demons in a minute, but sticking with Trump and last night, you're absolutely correct. That if he had done what you and I wish he had done last night, he would have been in a different kind of trouble. Our friend Max Blumenthal on the show just the other night made the point that he thinks Trump is becoming increasingly anxious about his own personal security. You saw the man shot dead at Mar-a-Lago the other day. There were 2 credible assassination plots against him already, one of which whistled past his ear or even through it, killed a fireman in the stand behind him. There are people out to kill Donald Trump, and that's while he's playing ball with Netanyahu. Can you imagine how dangerous it would be if he were to kick over the traces?
Well, he looked terrible. So I agree with you that he's obviously uncomfortable in his own shoes at this point in his life. Speaking of his shoes, he has this condition in his ankles where they are grossly swollen without any cognizable explanation for it. He has lost some weight, but he just looked terrible last night. I agree with Max. A, Max is one of the smartest people on the planet. B, there is evidence for Trump's fears. His biggest fear, however, should be that his administration will be roundly and soundly rejected by the American public in November, and who can blame them? I mean, he's dispatched his own personal army, which has murdered 3 Americans and injured countless others in the name of arresting immigrants. Their latest stunt is to issue a memo saying even lawful immigrants will be arrested. But this is just crazy. This is just insane. They've lost just about every challenge to their behavior, but they keep it up over and over again. What this has done to his base amongst Hispanics, amongst African Americans, amongst people like me, who's the grandson of immigrants. I don't know if my grandparents came here legally or not. I'm glad they came here. He has lost a tremendous amount of support over that. And I think he knew it, and he did nothing to help himself last night.
No, he was playing to Peoria last night rather than the base, which, as you say, included a remarkable number of Hispanics, remarkable number of African Americans, remarkable progress he made, more than any other Republican has ever done amongst minority ethnic populations. But I know you're pressed for time, Your Honor, so let me go on to the Epstein affair, a man in your position must be following them at least as closely as I am. How do you calibrate the scale of the damage in the US? In Britain, it's the only issue in town. It's bringing down crowned heads, not just in the UK, but across Europe. And cabinet ministers are being arrested. The Prime Minister of Norway just tried to commit suicide after being arrested. Former Prime Minister, I should say. How do you calibrate the damage in the US so far?
I don't believe that the damage in the U.S. has reached its peak yet. Tomorrow's New York Times will report the existence in the Epstein files of a complaint by a young woman who says she was sexually abused and beaten by Trump when she was 13 or 14. And she reported it to the FBI. The FBI investigated this with 4 memoranda, none of which was in the file. I think when this comes out tomorrow, it will stir the pot again. It'll put tremendous pressure on the Department of Political Justice to explain why it failed to comply with a federal statute signed into law by Donald Trump that required that all these things be revealed. It especially said they may not redact because of embarrassment. They can only redact to protect the identity of the victim, already done in this case, or because of an ongoing criminal investigation, which is inconceivable. Epstein's been dead more than 5 years. Great Britain, as you know, has many crimes for which there is no statute of limitations, like misconduct in office, which is why Andrew Mountbatten Windsor can still be prosecuted if he traded important financial information, like when the Bank of England was going to buy and sell gold and at what they were going to buy and sell it in return for sexual favors. No matter when that happened, he could still be prosecuted. Over here, the statute of limitations is 5 years. So no matter what they find in those files, the worst that would happen would be embarrassment or ostracization or impeachment. There can't be prosecution. So the fact that they may use as an excuse we have an ongoing investigation, that's just a canard. They may have the investigation, but they know it's ongoing nowhere because they can't indict.
It is almost as grave as any allegation could be. A 13 or 14-year-old girl complaining to the FBI that she was sexually abused and that she was raped, because no child of that age can consent to sexual relations. So that she's alleging essentially that she was raped by the current president of the United States. Doesn't get more serious than that. But as you say, his administration have broken their legal obligation to include this with her name redacted, but not his, and have done so for plain and obvious reason. If he's in a corner in the Persian Gulf, he's in a real corner now with the Epstein affair, isn't he? He can't risk leaving office unpardoned, and if Vance became president before the end of Trump's term, and he did pardon Trump, Vance is kissing.
Well, that's the end of Vance's political career.
Goodbye.
Correct. Yeah. That would be the end of Vance's political career. He'd be like Gerald Ford was, just a holdover president with no chance of running at all. He wouldn't even get the Republican nomination to succeed himself. I happen to think his political career is over either way, even if Trump serves the full term, because Trump's presidency is indefensible and Vance has been the principal cheerleader of it.
So the reverse of the question asked in the epic Mel Brooks picture, The Producers, where did it all go wrong Your Honor.
People trusted a person inherently unworthy of trust. A masterful speaker and demonstrator and performer who knew what buttons to press. History is filled with people like this who swayed the public. How many times did he say, no more foreign wars? How many times did he say, no more regime change? How many times did he say, I'm going to get rid of the neocons? He's now the darling of neocon regime change, if ever there was one. He's going to outdo George W. Bush.
In 90 seconds, Your Honor, does the Democratic Party still exist? I have no idea who their leader is or what their stance is on anything.
Their only unifying factor is a rejection of all things Trump. I don't know if they exist as a party. They appear to be two parties, the sort of John Fitzgerald Kennedy moderate / conservative rational Democrats and the hard lefties, typified by some names that may be known across the pond, like AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Bernie Sanders. These people, by the way, hate each other as much as they both hate the Republicans. So I don't know who could unify the Republican Party besides their opposition to and hatred of Donald Trump. I don't know what person could reach out to both branches, make sense to both branches, and be their standard bearer in 08, which tells you that they have as many problems as the Republicans do.
Good God, we're all in trouble. We're up the Yangtze without a paddle. Thank you very much indeed, Judge Andrew Napolitano, the host of Judging Freedom. And thanks very much for joining us again on the Mother of
I'll see you again. I'll
shows.
see you again.
Let me take soon, I hope, Your Honor. Let's take a quick break. Your call's next. Gayatri won't be with me this evening. She's poorly, so you'll have to put up with me without her lovely tones breaking it up. So a quick break, and then your call's right up to the end of the show. Stay tuned. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Taipei, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq.
They don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, you've got 10 minutes or so to cast your vote on tonight's poll. Is Israel planning to use nuclear weapons against Iran? Yes or no? Coming up for 30,000 people have voted on that poll. Let's go to the lines. On line 1, Alex in Canada, in Toronto, on Yves Engler, our guest earlier this evening. Alex, welcome.
Hi, George. I've called many times before on your show. I love it. I'm really thrilled that you had Yves Engler on today because he's simply the George Galloway of Canada. And I've told him before, if the NDP won't let him run, he's going to have to start a branch of the Workers' Party. And then you had Judge Napolitano,
well, I almost suggested
also a
that
wonderful
to him,
guy.
Alex.
I did like Yves' term of Zionist authoritarianism. I call it corporate capture, but it definitely has a Zionist side to it. And it's funny that Judge Napolitano is basically making the same complaints about the American government than Yves Engler is about Canada and you are about England. Do you think that we all have the exact same problems of Zionist authoritarianism?
Well, we were, as Oscar Wilde famously put it, two countries divided by a common language, but it is increasingly the case that Britain, the United States, Canada, and Australia, for that matter, are virtually identical polities with virtually identical forces in motion, virtually identical power structures, and virtually identical tendency towards authoritarianism and the outrage of tyranny against free speech, free expression, free assembly, free activity of non-government organizations and so on. We have a tyranny of the state in all the Anglo-Saxon, or in the Anglosphere, let me put it that way more correctly. In the Anglosphere, of which you and I are a part, we have the same people in government, and we have the same people who are supposedly in opposition, who are in fact two cheeks of the same backside. And therefore the need in your country, mine, and in the United States and Australia is for a new politics to emerge, expecting relief from all this, from either Tweedledee or Tweedledum, or forming the weird idea that Tweedledee is maybe slightly better than Tweedledum, when in fact the point about Tweedledee and Tweedledum is that they are literally identical, and that in all meaningful ways your parties, our parties, and the American parties are identical and different only in artifice, different only in illusion, in the color of their ties. There's no meaningful difference on the big issues that affect the day-to-day lives of everyone, as well as the global issues of war and peace, of freedom and repression. And we're going to have to draw the obvious conclusion from that. I mean, you made a joke about it, and I said I almost asked him. But Yves does have to form. Doesn't have to call it the Workers' Party, but he has to form a party like the Workers' Party. The Americans have to have a party like the Workers' Party, or we like theirs. We like Yves Engler's. I mean, we're facing the same enemy. We're speaking the same language. We have access to the same methods of communication, the same platforms that allow us to talk with each other, and to, in our case, ever increasing numbers. We're going to have to draw the obvious conclusion. We have to work together. We have to act together. If you're facing the same enemy, you have to act together. That's surely as obvious as A, B, C. I mean, I am astounded by the growth of my audience. That's probably why they made it impossible for me to go on living in my country. Just this week on just Facebook, I have 10 million views in 1 week on one platform. And I'm on all the platforms every week. This shows that there's a huge market, if you like, for our independent political point of view that you share, I share, Yves shares, and millions of people share across North America, Australia, and in the United Kingdom, which is not much longer for this world. I'll be making quite an important speech, I think, in the next week or two about what I see as the future of the United Kingdom. Alex in Toronto, thanks for giving me the opportunity to say all that. Now, thanks too to some of tonight's leading supporters who've already backed the show through moats.tv, our website. The lovely Lisa Roddy, Melissa Arvin, Jonathan King, Nargis Balti, and Alec Pringle. Big thanks to all of you. I know some of the people in that list. Special thanks and hi to you. To keep the program going strong, you must donate, even if it's only £1, $1, or €1. Go to moats.tv, click Donate Now. Donate what you can manage. It can be recurring or it can be one-off. £1, $10, €5. It all counts. Now, Joe is in Louisiana. Wants to talk about Greater Israel and Iran. Joe, welcome.
Welcome, George. Welcome. I think that with the generals in the Pentagon throwing and pumping the brakes on this Iran thing, I think Trump will cut a deal with Israel. And the people that's really in trouble is Jordan, Syria, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And I think that what signaled it for me was when the third aircraft carrier went to the Med. It is positioned there to cut off any Turkish intervention to support MBS once they launch the Greater Israel Project. That's what I think is about to happen. They don't want to go into with Iran, the puppet sellout Arabs, thinking that America will come there to remove the Shiite enemy, and the Sunnis are the sheep that are being set up for slaughter. That's what I think is about to happen.
Well, it's a fascinating thesis, Joe. It's not ridiculous. If the Persian power were to be destroyed, the Sunni countries would be sitting ducks. They would be turkeys that voted and facilitated Christmas. But your theory is that they won't actually attack Iran. They'll go straight for the Greater Israel, which puts Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon in the frame first, and then Saudi Arabia and Iraq. It's not an outlandish theory, and it would be a very interesting test as to what the attitudes would be of the people in those countries. I know what the abilities of their leaders are, negligible to do anything about it, but their people are very fine people who fought once for their independence, and the question is, would they do so again? Joe, thanks for that call from Louisiana. Here's some comments. Tim Joe says Trump wanted a Congressional Medal of Honor for his bone spurs. I'm puzzled by these bone spurs. He's had a lifetime of playing golf, and now he's disco dancing to the gay anthem YMCA on every platform that I see him on. How do you do that with bone spurs? Dennis Balgobin says Donald Trump is the Idi Amin of the United States. He's a buffoon like Idi Amin was. That's a very acute observation, you know, and I hadn't thought of it before. Zilla Burns says serious toilet failure puts top U.S. warship in trouble as it prepares to attack Iran. Sounds like the president won't be the only one using diapers during this war. And Dan Bauer, 3669, says, does Iran have any plumbers? the sailors could hire. And Guchu says, George, can you bring the Kurdish perspective and their potential to joining Western forces in case of war erupting? On the line is our old friend Lance in Canada. Wants to talk about Cuba and Epstein. Go ahead, Lance.
Well, I do feel like you just insulted the memory of Idi Amin, but anyway, maybe
about half
Cuba
on Big Eddie Amin, yes.
I was in Cuba, and the blockade had just started, and people were being shuffled around and stuff like that. But anyway, the resort I was in, there were wild cats everywhere, right? So what would happen is the Cuban vets would come in, and they would round up the wild cats, and they would neuter them. And then when they had done neutering them, they would clip their ear so they knew which cats they were neutered. And effectively, all the cats were neutered. So my thought was we could learn something from those Cuban vets who were doing something extremely humane. We could round up everybody from the Epstein files, neuter them, clip their ear, and then Donald Trump's ear might actually be clipped for real this time. And we would know who they all are.
That is the best call of the night, and many a night. You took me quite by surprise. I thought we were going on to discuss Cuba, but we're going on now to discuss what should be done with the degenerates of the Epstein affair. And that would be a singular contribution that the Cuban vets could make. I wouldn't ask doctors to do it, but vets could do it, neuter them, clip their ear, so that mark of shame would accompany them always. And as you pointed out in your brilliant finale, maybe this time the blood on Donald Trump's ear would be real. Thanks, Lance. Raymond is in Arkansas. He wants to talk about Iran and the battleships. Go ahead, Raymond.
Well, let me quash that, first of all, because you can castrate those fools. They'll pick up a screwdriver. But anyway, let's get on to the point at hand, because it was supposed to be humorous. I want to apologize to all the women in the United States Navy, because although you do use way too much toilet paper for the job at hand, you obviously didn't do this. It's mutantee on the bounty. Yeah, we blessed toilet. Really? T-shirts down the toilet paper. That says something, doesn't it? It really does. And here's the thing, guys. Did you enjoy your State of the Union address? Because if you don't like the Jared Kushner administration, with the 25th Amendment, what we're going to get is the Peter Thiel administration. You want to talk about jumping out of the frying pan into fire. It's just screwed two ways till Tuesday, George, right? But anyway, yeah, I was supposed to be dropping jokes, but no. 42 times Scripture condemns doing absolutely nothing in the face of evil, George. And yeah, what have we done? Have you seen any justice come to bear on these perpetrators? Wouldn't it be cool if we had a department to investigate all this stuff, compile it, and prosecute them? I know, we could call it the Department of Justice or something. Oh, yeah.
And you could even have a specialized police force and call it the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I saw an interview between Bongino and Patel, the gruesome twosome that were until recently running the FBI. Patel still is, in which they congratulated each other on the great job that they've done, but they have prosecuted absolutely nobody guilty of crimes in the documents their own DOJ are daily releasing. Raymond, thank you for that. Now, tomorrow at 9 p.m., you can watch Campaign Talk from the Workers' Party, aforementioned. Our young hope, Mark Belshaw, will be joined by guest Danny Mazhar for a discussion on the party's campaign activity and the political developments shaping Westminster. And by God, it's being reshaped by the hour. The programme will examine current issues, strategy, and national debate. That's Campaign Talk, streaming live on YouTube and Rumble tomorrow at 9 p.m. UK time. George is in New York on Iran and the State of the Union. Go ahead, George.
Hello, George.
I'm just calling just to briefly make a couple of comments. One, that it's been very unnerving over these last couple of years, and it just seems to be getting worse. But we seem right now with the whole possible attack on Iran, taking us further and further down the slope. As a musician, Paul Simon once said in one of his songs, we're slip, sliding away. And, it's just, terrible to see what's happening. I hope that it doesn't happen, but unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that it will. And I also wanted to comment, I think at the beginning of your show today, you were saying that both yourself and your wife were detained for something like 9 hours and questioned. Am I correct or
yes,
no?
Correct, absolutely correct, yes.
Yeah, the reason why I'm even bringing that up is, it goes to the whole climate that we have both in the UK and in the United States, as to the erosion of what was once valued as being freedom of speech. And, you'll know when you become a problem, because in your case, you were detained. I think once you cross a certain red line, in what you state, publicly, and as a person of some notoriety, you get to the point where you become a target. Once you become a problem, then you need to be dealt with, and unfortunately, that goes for everybody. That goes for all of us these days. I just wanted to say it's terrible, but that's about it, George. I have nothing.
Well, I'm grateful,
George,
for your concern. I had thought that my status, if for want of a better word, as a 7 times elected member of Parliament, as one of the better known people in the country, as the leader of a registered British political party, as someone elected to Parliament from the 1980s until the year before last, the audience I have, including you, the big following that I've got, millions and millions of followers across social media, I did not think that the state would dare to subject me to what they did subject me to last October. I did not imagine for 1 minute that they would do so under the Terrorism Act, in which, inter alia, you are not being arrested, but you are not free to leave. This is Kafka Day, right? You are not arrested, but you're not free to leave. So in what sense are you not arrested? You have no right to remain silent. If you remain silent, you will automatically be guilty of a crime under the Terrorism Act. And good luck, the police officer said, ever catching an airplane again. And then subjected a man of 70 to 71 at that point to endure hours of meaningless questioning whilst they seized devices from myself and my wife, and that, of course, was what the whole thing was for. It wasn't really to get an answer from me on why I admire Foreign Minister Lavrov. They could have consulted Google for that. It wasn't really to ask me what I thought about China's new embassy in the East End of London. I speak about these things in public all the time. They weren't interested in my answers to their pitiful questions. They were raiding our devices. They were stealing our information, stealing our data on a fishing expedition in the hope of finding something that would justify their extreme action of holding someone like me at gunpoint. And I can't say too much. We are demanding that they destroy the material that they copied from our devices. I don't know if that appeal will be successful. I hope that it will. There was absolutely no justification whatsoever for stopping me and my wife under the Terrorism Act. The only conceivable reason for stopping us could be what are legally protected characteristics, namely our openly expressed genuine political views. I am entitled legally to have the political views that I have. And therefore, for you to stop me under the Terrorism Act only because of political views that I am entitled to have is an illegal act. And we will not rest until we have established that fact. But the reason I am in voluntary exile is that they will not assure me that the same thing will not happen again and again and again. And I have reason to believe that the increasing popularity of this show is a real problem for them. They don't call it a show, of course. They call it as a hostile act. They see this show as a hostile act against the United Kingdom. When you ask them, as our lawyers have, what's hostile act about a TV show? They say that hostile act is defined as disinformation. But of course, one man's disinformation is another man's information, and vice versa. I believe the BBC to be guilty of disinformation. I believe I'm giving you honest information. But of course, the state can define hostile act as disinformation, and therefore this show is guilty of a hostile act, and therefore this show must be closed down. That's why I'm no longer doing it from Britain, because the knock on the door and the pulling of the plug was, I believe, perhaps only days away. So until things change in Britain, I'll continue to speak freely, because the one thing that I fear, I don't fear death, as I've explained many times. The one thing I fear is being silenced, of not being able to speak as I wish freely to speak. And I fear being forced to stop telling you the truth. And so I've come to places where I can freely speak the truth. George in New York, thanks. My old friend and Moat's legend, Terence in Reading. Britain is sick of the two parties. That's your case. Tell us about it.
Well, Mr. Galloway, I phoned earlier to ask the question what your opinion, your party's opinion was on the Gordon and Denton, because a fellow professor retired from university asked me yesterday what's Mr. Galloway's opinion. So I asked, and he just answered before I could ask. However, it takes me to the point that the British people are more savvy than the Americans. I think Polanski will win it, and I think what he's done there is magnificent. I also think that the Ginger Group is growing. Plaid Cymru in Wales. Yeah, I called One Eyelid Moron a lazy as never worked in her life nearly 28 years ago. Sinead is 30, my oldest daughter. She was in a pram. And she paid me the greatest compliment by telling me to PISS off. And I thought, thank you very much. That's exactly what you will do in future. She waves her hands. Cymru, SNP, your party, Mr. Corbyn's party, other parties, I think there is definitely a 30 MP ginger group waiting to just cause honesty. And the second point is that it won't be long, Mr. Galloway will be under as Irishman still carrying the truth. And that gives me greater pleasure to think about that prospect.
God bless you, Terence, as always, and your family. I will make a speech in the next week or so on the future of the Union when the facts change. So do my opinions, as Groucho Marx famously put it. And the facts have changed, at least changed sufficiently to change my opinion. And I now believe that Scotland will be independent within the next 10 years. I believe that Wales will be independent within the next 10 years, and that Ireland will be reunified within the next 10 years, maybe even quicker than that. That's why I'm very much hoping to live for 10 years so I can be a part of it all. I think the British state has committed suicide. The deep state and the political window dressing of the deep state and the official state media, which is what we have all destroyed the thing they claim to love, the United Kingdom. It's united no longer, and it doesn't deserve to be united any longer. And the good news is it isn't going to be. Is Israel planning to use nuclear weapons against Iran? Well, 30,000 people voted overwhelmingly yes to that question. Some comments. Melita Filter says, rest in peace, George Harrison. Here Comes the Sun was one of my favourite songs at that time. George Harrison was my favourite Beatle, if you'll indulge me. I loved him dearly. I miss him sorely. I loved all of his incarnations. I loved his time in the Beatles. I loved his songs at the time of the Beatles. I think they were the best Beatles songs. Something in the Way You Move and Across the Universe and others were masterpieces that have stood the test of time. But I also loved him when he was on his own. My Sweet Lord is one of my all-time favourite songs, and George really wanted to be with God, and all too soon he was. But I also loved his work with the Travelling Wilburys, who are an unsung group of brilliant musical stars, even better as a sum than they were of the individual parts. Jumpin' Jack Flash 2026 says, almost 2 years to the day since George Galloway won the Rochdale by-election. What a night that was, but tomorrow it'll be the turn of the Greens to plunge in the dagger, and it'll be choice. And Yipple K Hong 5111, it's 4 a.m. here in Kuala Lumpur. I just can't miss Moats. Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway. I didn't tell you what time it is here, my friend. Miranda Fair says, sorry to hear Gayatri can't be joining this evening. I hope she's feeling well soon. Thank you, Miranda. It is so rare for her to be poorly. She carries all the rest of us through our aches and pains and ailments. And I think it's all the changes of weather going from place to place that maybe has brought her low, but I'll pass on your best wishes. Health First 23 says, we want you back home, Gigi and Gigi. Thank you for that. Let's take some final calls. David in Manchester on Cuba and your party. I don't know if you mean your party or my party, but either way, David, you're welcome. Go ahead.
Good evening, George. God bless you and Gayatri for doing his work. I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions, George. I was reading about with Trump getting his hands on Venezuelan oil, what do you think the future could be for Cuba? And also, can Jeremy Corbyn become a political force again? I know there's some sort of leadership vote going on at the moment. I don't really understand it, but if you could try and put us in the picture.
Yeah, well, I won't intrude too much onto the second point. There are elections going on. Jeremy Corbyn is seeking to regain control of the party that he founded but was never allowed to lead in a burst of ultra-left mania, identity politics, schizophrenia. Corbyn was robbed of the opportunity to lead the party that is nothing without him. We'll see how those elections go. Cuba will never die. The Cuban people will never allow the Cuban Revolution to die. The allies of Cuba will never allow Cuba to die. Cuba is a great example of necessity being the mother of inventions. Trust me, they won't be depending on oil embargoed by Donald Trump for very much longer. Chris is in the US, in Vermont, on Iran and Israel. Chris, welcome.
Oh, thank you, George. You're a hero of mine. You're one of the best. Great to be here. Thanks for letting me on. I heard you earlier talk about Iran's missile range, and I had read a few weeks ago that they had tests for intercontinental ballistic missiles that landed in Siberia. So it was a joint thing between them and Russia. And although I also heard they don't have a reentry vehicle for it, but here in the United States, at least I am with Iran. This whole thing needs to stop with Israel and us spending our dollars and lives for the Greater Israel Project. And that's about it.
Well, that's about it for me also, Chris. Beautifully summed up and bringing the show to an end. Things have got to change. The objective facts in the world have changed. The United States is no longer the top dog. Russia and China are more than a match for US power, both economically and militarily, and increasingly in soft power. United States soft power is virtually defunct. When I was growing up, all I wanted to watch was American TV and American movies. Now I cross the road to avoid most American TV and most American movies. Of course, the Americans are a great people. They will always be so. But they are no longer in a position to dictate to the world. They can dictate to small countries, and they can continue to act as pirates against their own allies and friends, like Denmark and Greenland and Canada and Panama. They can do that, but they cannot impose their will on Russia and impose their will on China. And the tectonic plates have shifted, and they have shifted decisively, and the world has changed. And sooner or later, hopefully sooner, for all of our sakes, the political class in all countries will come to terms with that and work out a new modus operandi, a new way of living together. For if we cannot live together, all of us will surely perish together. We've had George Harrison, we've had Paul Simon, we've had Prince, if you caught the reference. It's been a great show tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did. And if you did, do come back on Sunday when, God willing, Gayatri and I will be back presenting the mothership, the original mother of all talk shows. It's currently the biggest show of its kind in the entire English-speaking world. For a reason, you. Thanks very much.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.